All right, everybody, this is an exciting one. I love it having a guest back. I knew I had to have him back, and I promised you this, Bob, when I had you on last year, that I would have you back when you did something that is quite extraordinary, especially for somebody like me who hates writing. Bob Conlin is with us today again. He is a published author, not just an author, but a published author with one of the best titles of a book I've ever heard. Why My Relationships Suck.
Right to the point.
Bob, I feel seen. I feel a bit of shame.
Yeah.
I've read the book, and I want everybody else to hear about this. So, Bob, welcome back, my friend. So good to have you back here with us, and this time as a truly published author.
Yeah, Jason, thanks so much for having me back. And I remember our last conversation, like the book still had a few more steps to go to get it out into the world. And we're like, oh, I'll have you back when your book's out. And I was like, that's never going to happen. And it's been like if anyone's written a book, I hope to think I'm not alone in my process, but it's a process. And
yes.
You think you're done, you're not. You think you're done, you're not. You give up, you start again. And it's just one thing after another. And just been, it's been a journey. Like my relationship to writing this book sucked. It took me, it took me 4 years to finally get this out. And if I look back in hindsight, I probably could have written the whole thing in about 3 months. Mm-hmm. So it goes to show you like how much, I let life get in the way, or I let mindset, like who am I to write this book, or what are people going to think, or, all kinds of stuff. And I think that's so much of the creative process is just getting out of your own way. And for me, it required an army of people around me to help me do that, to push me, to support me, and to keep me connected to my vision, which is ultimately to help people have more powerful and impactful, fulfilling relationships.
Yeah. How to say that my relationships don't suck, or maybe not suck as bad.
Right.
Your next book will be Why My Relationships Still Suck. 10% not as bad, but they still suck. Or still a little bit better.
Why my relationships are a little okay now. Yeah.
Why they're a little mediocre. They don't totally suck. Yeah. So I don't want to write a book. I hate writing. I know quite a bit about the publishing and the marketing of a book. And a lot of people don't think about that. That is a beast too, because you have to figure out how you're going to publish it. There's a variety of options. There's a lot of people that will sell you services around that. Right. Then you really, if you want to sell any books, and I have a friend who says the amount of books your first book sold, which I actually know is not true about you, is generally the exact number of relatives you have. I was like, yeah, but I know you've actually done pretty well with this, but there's so much content and so many books that people don't know. And so the idea of a marketing plan, come on a podcast, I don't know if you've done anything locally and you're based in Chicago, but the idea that the work is not done when you finish that book.
No, if anything, that's just when it starts, right?
Yeah,
if you actually want to get it out. And that's something I'm still discovering along the way. Like it was so much momentum to finally finish this project, get it out, get it in my hands and the hands of the readers. And now it's like, okay, we need to create some marketing around it. We need to create a plan to get this message out more impactful and faster, I guess. But that's the thing too. Like I have a very busy business. I've got a 3-year-old son. I've got positions in a couple nonprofits. I'm a busy dude. Right. And what's next is getting the support I need to help with, marketing and getting this book out, which is, coming, but it's probably Q3, Q4.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get it done. I wanted to let it settle. I wanted to, let the book push me around a little bit and then start getting it out there. Yeah.
Nice.
But I've been surprised at the response I've gotten from essentially just only like promoting it on social media and to the folks in my life and my clients. And, I was really surprised when Barnes and Noble's picked it up.
Nice.
It blew my mind. And, it's just been magical, man, in spite of what I haven't been doing, it's been doing great. So
imagine what's possible if you do something. Not that you're not, and I know you're being humble here. So Bob, I want to get into some of the content of the book, but before we do that, I'd love if you would share with all of us here a little bit about the background on the why. I'm always really interested in why people write a book. I'm going to leave that wide open to you, how you want to answer that, but why did you write this book?
Yeah, great question. I found myself at a crossroads in my life probably around the age 42. I'm going to be 48 next month. And I was very much taking inventory of my entire life. I had kind of all of the things in life that were supposed to make me happy and how we typically define success. Yet I still found myself unfulfilled, wanting more, wanting is it was almost like yearning. I'm like, man, is this all that life has to offer? And I had a great relationship. I had a great job, car. I had all the stuff, but I was still like, I know that there's a deeper, more fulfilling experience for me. And it also coincided with some training I was doing to be trained as a ontological coach. Mm-hmm. And in that program, which you're also a graduate of, mm-hmm. There's a module 1 month around relationships. And I had just exited a 7-year relationship that was good. There was love there was friendship and partnership, but again, it was just kind of not quite the full spectrum of the way I wanted to receive and give love, right? There's just still something missing there. And one of the most obvious and aha moments that I had when I was learning about relationships, which is important because no one teaches us how to create relationships. There's
you didn't have your relationship class in high school?
No, which we should.
We should. I could have.
Yeah. We picked some stuff up along the way from, our parents, our friends, family, media, society, right? And then we're supposed to know how to create meaningful, impactful, collaborative relationships. And one of the like I said, the biggest aha I got was the common denominator in all of my relationships was me. And it sounds so simple, but it was such a profound awareness for me, because if I'm not experiencing what I want to be experiencing in my relationships, wouldn't it make sense to look at myself? And I mean, that goes for anything in life, but I think particularly in relationships. And what I found was I was a victim. I would point my finger at all my partners. They left me, they broke my heart. I took almost zero responsibility for my experience of a relationship. And with that training in that program was the first time that I started to really take an inward look, is how am I in the same predicament or same spot again in a relationship? Another breakup, kind of broke up the same way. I'd been divorced before that, and just had this kind of trail of wreckage of all these relationships. And when I started taking that responsibility and learning about myself and what I'm committed to, and I think integrity is a big conversation here too. If it's if I say I want this, but I'm doing this that does not support that's not aligned. It's not going to work out. So I started getting very clear on A, what I wanted, B, what was in the way, and then C, what were the actions I could take to start creating this experience of relationship that I wanted. And at the time I was on the dating apps, and I had this my profile up there, blah, 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 whatever. And I was this doesn't represent who I am or what I want. These words, and our words are, I heard this yesterday, that our words are spells. Our words actually
spells.
Yeah. Our words actually create our experience of life. So, noticing mindset and what I'm actually articulating, how is that supporting what I want? And I rewrote my profile to be very clear on what I wanted and who I was. And it was the next day I started matching and connecting with these really powerful, successful, beautiful women. Whereas before it was nothing, it was just nothing, or wasn't aligned with who or what I wanted. And, so I started exploring that a bit more. And then within I saw this woman on the apps, and I was there she is. This is the avatar of the woman that I want to be with. She was gorgeous, beautiful, successful, had it all, all of it. Right. So of course I swiped on her, and then I would, at night before I go to bed, I would just look at her picture and just call her in, or I want to meet you. I want to meet you. And 2 days later we matched, and then fast forward, she's now my wife.
I was going to say, if you're a Seinfeld fan, it'd be, I swiped right on her, yada, yada, yada. We have a 3-year-old son, and we're married together.
Yeah.
Bob, I have to say, as a fellow coach and entrepreneur, you may want to consider also expanding your offerings to consulting around dating apps, because Man, and I know you know this too from working with lots of different people on the romantic stuff. This is something people bitch about all the time. Any client I have who is on the dating apps will bitch about how crappy it is. They hate them. And like, man, like I've been married for quite a while. I was never on the apps, but I'm just thinking to myself, what a reframe. Because most people on the apps are like, how can I make myself as attractive as possible? And then people are like, that's bullshit. And like people get catfished. But it sounds like what you did there, you actually got really clear about like just and you're being honest with whoever on that app and showing that was what you wanted. And then that, like, I love the idea that words are spells, and then you boomed. So it's so funny. You're like, it didn't feel like me, and I was attracting nothing. And then I put myself out there, and I found a bunch of women that were perfect or like great for me. And then I ended up marrying one. What a great story.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's almost like, you know, like you can't make it up. It's almost magical in a sense. But, you know, I think with all the work I do, especially in the coaching realm, is so much of what's in our way is our mindset or our story or our belief or faith that we can actually have what we want. And, you know, if I step into anything thinking it's going to suck or I'm not going to get what I want, like, you're already at a disadvantage, right? Yeah. So really working on mindset and who you're being and how you're showing up to these things, again, whatever it is the first step. So I was really cultivating that possibility and that mindset and started acting in accordance with it, right? So the book is really designed around, you know, really understanding the relationship to yourself. Yeah. And how you might be getting in your own way. And it's normal, right? Like we have a past, we have hurts, we have harm, we have trauma, we have stories and ideas of how things should be, right? And they may or may not be. And we don't often take the responsibility that's needed to take our own inner work on, our own healing, our own understanding of who we are and who we're not and what we need and what we don't need. And it's really, you know, the book's really an invitation to explore that. And, you know, I like to say that the cliff notes of why my relationships suck is because you kind of suck, you know, and when you read the book, it's kind of
right now.
Yeah.
It's like that resonates. Yeah.
When you read the book, it's, you know, it's kind of like a hug and a little slap in the face at the same time. Yeah. You know, in a loving way, because it's gonna push you up against some truth about yourself that you may or may not want to take on. So, you know, as you read the book, it's like, put it down if it's too much at times. You know, pick it back up when you're ready. But the thing is it's going to be uncomfortable. Creating anything new and different outside of how it normally goes is going to be uncomfortable. Yeah. But can you be in that discomfort, moving towards what you want versus stay in the discomfort and not move? Right? Yeah. If it's going to be uncomfortable either way, you might as well move towards what you want uncomfortably.
I'm going to go into the content of the book in a minute, but I just had a question that popped up, and because it's my podcast, I'm just going to ask it.
Go for it.
When I had you on here last year, you shared with us the story of your son and your wife, which was a national news story. Unbelievable. How did that affect you writing this book in terms of what's in it? What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I learned through that whole experience, I learned so much about myself, and, you know, I was challenged at like at every turn there was a challenge, right? We were told that essentially our son was going to die with a possibility that my wife could pass as well. Yeah. While we were trying to save our baby. My wife's water broke at 5 months.
Right at the beginning of the pandemic as well.
Literally the day Chicago shut down for the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the baby kept hanging on. Wife kept hanging on. They got admitted. They were in isolation for 3 months. And then we had a totally healthy, normal baby boy born. You know, he spent a little time in the NICU, but then came home and holy shit, we're parents. You know, then we're parents after that. But, you know, I think it tested so much of my wife and I's partnership. And my wife's, she's a trained ontological coach as well. Super powerful human being. And, you know, both of us with our years of training and experience, like, we almost didn't make it. It was hard. And we had every tool in the book at our disposal to use. And I think it really challenged me to like really look at how am I showing up for this? How am I showing up for fatherhood? How am I showing up for my marriage? How am I showing up for this pandemic. How am I showing up for all of it? And, communication is number one, right? And it's intentional communications, having the harder, difficult conversations on purpose with your partner to help you both move through whatever challenge you're facing. And we were facing one of the craziest challenges you could probably imagine at the craziest time. So, it was a lot of, understanding, and my wife and I, we do couples work, we work with couples, and we have a huge focus on understanding what our needs are. And that was like the biggest check-in, is like, what do I need today? What do I need in this moment? What do I need from my partner? Right. And, we didn't always get it right. Always get it right. But the thing that is so beautiful about my wife and I's relationship is that we are mirrors for each other's healings, for each other's needs, for each other's like understanding of what it means to be partners. Right. And to date, we've always come back to center. We've always been able to come back to what's most important, which is our partnership, our commitment to each other's partnership, and our commitment to understanding, learning, loving, and growing together.
Yeah. I think I met your wife once, but just as we start to talk about the book, if I was your wife, I would go, if I was mad at you, would be like, you wrote a book literally saying that your relationships suck, Bob. Well, what do you think's going on here? Like, what a weapon you use. You'd be like, dude, you outed yourself right here. Like, your relationships suck.
Like, bro, have you been talking to my wife? She like literally, like, after the book came out. Yeah. After the book came out, and she read through it, we were going through something. I don't remember quite what it was, and it doesn't matter. But she was like, where's the guy that wrote this book? And I was just like, oh. But like one of the beautiful things that we do for each other is we call each other fourth, which is like a coachy term to say like, hey, we remind each other of what we said we're committed to, and we remind each other that maybe the actions or the conversations or things occurring, the dynamic occurring in the relationship right now, is not aligned with that. So let's pause, take a step back, and get recommitted.
Like what you said there, Bob, you said call each other fourth.
Yeah.
Not call each other out.
Right. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Chills.
Fourth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, here's the invitation, what do we, what's happening here? And I think, that takes a lot of responsibility, and it takes you getting out of the victim mindset. My partner did this or said that, or it's like, okay, great. So now what? Like, how long do you want to hold on to that hurt or disagreement versus getting back to what really matters, which is loving each other?
Yeah. And with your son, who's watching every last second of every last interaction, as you found, like, our son is a little bit younger than yours, but these little dudes and little girls, they're watching every last thing, last thing. It's unbelievable. All right. So Bob, let's talk about the title of the book.
Yep.
What do we, being everybody listening here, and hopefully that's a lot of people, what do we need to know about why our relationships suck?
I really think it's like a manual. It's a manual to take rigorous responsibility for how you create relationships, and create relationships from a new place, right? Creating relationships from a new possibility versus how it's gone from the past versus how you think it's going to go based on the past. But if you were to like completely wipe the slate clean and create a relationship in a way that's meaningful and that matters, like, how would you do it? Right. And this is, one way out of a gazillion, I'm sure, how to do it, but it's one that's worked for me, and it's that worked for a lot of my clients. I have clients that hire me for relationship, and, they end up meeting their soulmate and get married. It's like, it's unreal. That could take 6 months. It could take 4 years. Who knows?
Coaching ROI right there though. Right. Like, can't even put a dollar figure on that.
Right. Right. And it's really, again, it's really about understanding that relationship to yourself.
Yeah.
My whole philosophy is that we're in relationship to everything, to the people in our lives, the people we love, the people we lead, our environment, our home, our our career, all of it. And it's it's critical in nature to understand how you interact with all those relationships. You know, what is your impact on all those relationships? And is it the impact that you want or the impact that you don't? Is that impact serving your goals, serving the outcomes that you want? And, so it's really, the tagline is creating strong relationships with courage and heart. And I think that's really important because it takes buckets of courage to like face yourself in this way. It takes buckets of courage to put yourself back out there after you've been hurt, after your heart's been broken over and over again. It takes courage to bring that conversation to your husband or wife or partner. Like, hey, things aren't where I want them to be, and bringing heart into that, right? Which I think also brings curiosity, right? There's so much knowing that happens in really, I know how my partner is. I know this, I know that, or I can't have this, can't have that. And it's bringing that heart and curiosity is going to allow for more possibility. It's going to allow for different outcomes that you may have never thought imaginable.
Yeah. So if you and I were going to walk the streets, or you would walk the streets of Chicago, and you walk up to people and you'd say, hey, I want to ask you a question. You say, why does your relationship suck? Depending on who that person is, they might punch you in the face, right, or they might have a lot to share with you, or anywhere in between. This is why I said you can do this, because I'm not sure how safe this would be. But I'm curious, like, from your experience, and, you can speak for yourself here too, but also coaching people. And like, I think your wife's obviously been in relationships. So you have why would most people say that their relationships suck? Because, and I would say most people I know who've been in a long-term committed, and I'm talking about romantic relationship here, but I think that this would apply as well to people that have worked for the same people a long time. They've been managing people. 100%. I think most people would probably say there is some part about that relationship, if not a lot of it, that sucks.
Yep.
What do you believe that people generally say is why their relationships suck?
It's a great question, and it's provocative, right? And I think number one is that they're not asking that question. No, they're not taking inventory.
What I love about being a podcast host too is I can ask you this question, but do you think I'm going to go ask my wife this tonight? I'm like, hey, why does I might,
totally, but it's taking the inventory. Like, hey, what's maybe doesn't have to be those exact words, but like, hey, like, what's it like to be in a relationship with me right now? What's working? What's not? How can I help you feel closer to me? Like, these are powerful questions. But, I think it comes down to not understanding what we fundamentally need.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the questions, or, one of the contexts or ways we set up understanding this is like, if you don't know what you need, go look at what your biggest complaint is in your relationship. And oftentimes under that is your biggest unmet need. So we start there is understanding what our needs are, understanding the things that trigger us, right? Like triggers are things that like activate us emotionally. Typically it's a negative, it's a challenging, you get angry, frustrated, or upset, but we don't understand why, like why, your partner could come home and say something to you and it triggers you and you get upset and you walk out the door, right? But why? Where was that trigger born? And typically it goes way back to childhood.
Oh yeah.
It goes way back to understanding that, oh, my wife said this thing, and like there's a very young, small, wounded part of me that thinks she's going to leave. Yep. So I'm going to beat her to the punch and leave before she can, because I'm not going to let her hurt me, right? So
yeah,
we could spend a month talking about triggers, but really understanding our needs, our triggers. And that's pretty the foundational stuff. And then like the vision, right? Like, let's talk about what you actually want. And I find that a lot of folks, when I ask that question, they tell me what they don't want.
Yeah.
I wish we felt closer, we don't have enough intimacy, or communication's garbage, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, great. Like those, if you had the intimacy, the communication, those are all tools or ways of being, they're going to support this outcome. So what's the outcome? What's the actual vision you want to create in your relationship? And I had a client one time say this brilliant thing. She was a successful business owner. We were working with her and her husband, and they had 3 or 4 kids. They had successful, like they had it all. And then like they look at each other on the couch and like, who are you? Right. Yeah. So they ended up hiring us and working with us. And she's like, I've got goals in my business. I've got goals with my money. I've got goals with my health and well-being. But I look at my relationship and we have no goals. Like there's nothing that we're working towards.
Yeah.
Right. That's outside of like the achievement. Like they got the cars, they got the house, they got the businesses. But like what's the relational experiential goal that you want to have? Right. And that's a typically a newer question that folks don't actually really spend time on. Because again, like relationships are just supposed to happen. Right.
Yeah.
Or if they loved me, it would be easier, or whatever. You see, we start to get into trouble.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding our needs, our triggers, what we actually want. And then of course, like communication is that's the umbrella under it all. So if we can't communicate effectively, lovingly, and respectfully with each other, that's going to make it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding is like, how can my partner actually hear what I'm saying? How can I deliver in a way that's kind? How can we do this together versus becoming opponents? Yeah. Right. Or needing to be right.
Needing to be right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which feels so good, but typically doesn't work.
I've heard that, Bob. I've heard from other people. Yeah. As if Kirsten's listening, she'd go, uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many questions. I think I want to go towards parenting.
Yeah.
Since we're both parents, I'm 2-time parent, you're 1-time parent. Things change. Things change when you become a parent. I would assert that things change biologically and intellectually differently for men and women. We're talking about you and I are both married to women, so it's just for our conversation here, is priorities change and things like that. So one of you share with us, and I'm asking for myself, I trust it's going to be useful for people listening, is a lot of people, and you worked with people, maybe you felt this way. You said you've been divorced before, you've gone through breakups where you're like, man, this used to be so good.
Mm-hmm.
And now it sucks. And what I'm hearing you say here is, well, where have you started to suck more? Like you being like ourselves, look at ourselves. And where are we just putting that on somebody else? Because I like from my experience as being married for quite a while and knowing a lot of friends, and we have some friends that have gone through divorces and such. All I ever hear about is how it's the other person's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Every time, my ex-husband, my ex-wife, they did this, they did this, they did this. And I don't hear much about why they suck. And what I think I'm hearing you say is that's the easy pattern. That's the easy thing to do. So I guess there's two things. There's one, there's like the parenting part of it, things shift. How would you suggest that people adapt as they become parents? And two, I think I've answered my question. It's just easier to blame other people, blame the other person in the relationship.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah.
And as we become parents and we invite a whole other little being into our lives, like our relationship dynamic.
A new relationship.
Yeah, it's a new relationship, right? And it completely alters the dynamic. And where I find a lot of couples that are really challenged by that is they're trying to recreate what once was, right? Before the kid came along, before the additional responsibilities, before the sleepless nights, before the baby like hanging on mom constantly, so the last thing she wants is you to hang on her, right? Like all that stuff. And we can create resentment or judgment or assertions about how things are, versus like, hey, if I'm truly committed to this partnership and this relationship, we actually need to start a conversation about reinvention, right? How could this look now moving forward, right? And again, that starts with understanding yourself truly. And I think one of the hardest things a lot of parents, especially new parents, struggle with is like taking care of themselves. So if you're pouring, pouring from that empty cup, or you're exhausted, irritable, not taking care of your body, mind, spirit, all that's gonna get all over your relationship. So like you're kind of working, from a whole, right? So one of the first things we do is shore up those well-being structures and shore up to make sure that you're doing what you can to take care of yourself. And that, again, that's going to take some creativity, right? It might be like
Yeah.
taking the kid out of the house, letting your wife take a nap. You know, it might be a couple months ago, I kicked my wife out of the house for the weekend to go like hang out with herself at downtown at a hotel, like just to like get some time off. Right. And like, you know, she does that for me as well. And like, that's so important, is that we're taking care of this relationship first with ourselves, so we can start to have the energy, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual energy to then be in this reinvention conversation. Right. But I think we get in trouble. And I think that's what's so like alluring for individuals in relationships, is to step out. You know, they'll step out of their marriage and go have an affair because it's so much easier, right? It's sexy, it's provocative, it's like enticing, it's dramatic, right? And it's easy, right? And it's known, like there's not the additional like responsibilities that happen inside it, you know? So then, you know, that of course that's like a huge breakdown, but you know, it's again, it's about, all of this is about coming together and creating each day that's aligned with what we're committed to. And it's a challenge for a lot of parents. It's a challenge, but you know, I think where we get in trouble is we try to recreate what once was versus create what could be.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed on all of those fronts. Let's see, Bob, I know you and your wife, you do a lot of work with couples, and you do work individually as well. What's the major difference that you see between the opposite sexes around this topic?
Yeah, I see it every week. Typically, women are more open to the work. They're more open to, they're driving the conversation. Right. And typically you know, again, this is generalization, but typically the guy's like, everything's fine. You know, do we have to actually talk about this? Like they're not in a co-creative space together. They're not trying to create together.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, it's an uncomfortable, scary place to be, right? Because, you know, the first thing I hear is, you know, when my wife brings something to me is, oh, here's what's wrong or what I'm doing wrong. Right. So defense.
Me too.
Yeah. So defense immediately comes up.
What I hear, no matter.
Right? Versus like, oh, my partner that I said I'm committed to, that I said I want to spend the rest of my life with, is asking for support in our relationship. So can everything actually be fine if half the relationship says it's not? No. Yeah. So I think it's, you know, so how do we, you know, that's so much of the work I do with men too, is like, how do we get them in a container where they feel comfortable? They probably wouldn't say it. Where they feel safe, they probably wouldn't say that either. But actually to have these conversations that matter, so they can say what needs to be said, be who they need to be, get aligned and connected to what they're committed to, and then take action and be held accountable to that action moving forward. You know, so I mean that's the biggest difference I've seen. And you know, the men that step into the work, like I want to say every guy I've worked with, particularly in a relationship, that has said yes to either a program my wife and I run, or, you know, one-to-one coaching, whatever it is, they're like kicking and screaming coming in, and they're kicking and screaming leaving. Because they're just like, oh man, this was great. Like we really needed this, or man, this really helped. Like I know how to talk to my wife now, or my wife actually listens to me, or you know, vice versa, you know? And like, one of the cool things that happens is like with some of the tools that we have is that our couples know how to talk to each other so they can be heard. Right. So, you know, it's not a threat. It's not an obligation, but simply going back to that term, it's just the call forward. You know, it's call forward.
Yeah. That's awesome, Bob. I was just thinking about all of the benefits of doing this work with your wife or significant other, or if you're in a same-sex marriage, it doesn't really matter like what your relationship is, but just the benefit of doing this work together.
Oh yeah.
Like the intimacy, the communication, the less fighting as parents, your kids are going to have more fun. Likely they're going to see better modeling. Just awesome work. I'm really proud of you for getting this book out there.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
And And also, pointing the lens for all of us to say, hey, why do my relationships suck? Because I read the title, and I think you've designed it by this on purpose, and we haven't talked about it. It's about why your relationships suck, because my being Bob, but it's also, hey, read this, and I'm going to look introspective why my relationships suck too, and knowing that it's not going to be
right,
perfect.
and it's just an invitation. It's just a place to explore. Like, I don't have to be right about anything I wrote in this book, or but I know it's like if you're reading something and you're having a reaction to it, I always tend to get curious about that. If this is triggering you or pissing you off or creating some type of emotion in you, it's worth looking at. Again, it goes back to what we started with. It's like it's taking that radical responsibility. Because if not,
well, Bob, I want to.
I was thinking, if not you, who? Right.
Yeah. I want to leave us with this before we talk a little bit about where people can find the book and such. You mentioned that you don't have to be right about it, but damn, it feels good when you are. It's so
good. I love being right, but there's no ownership in being right. There's no ownership in being right.
That's the quote of the year. There's no ownership in being right. Can you imagine if I'm just thinking about in the presidential election coming up next year? If the debates and they go, let's start this a little bit differently. There's no, whoever, say right now, Mr. Trump, Mr. President Biden, there's no ownership in being right. So let's actually remove that from the table here as we start this debate. Can you imagine what would these people talk about?
There'd be nothing to talk about.
There'd be nothing to talk about. They'd be like, hey, they cut the commercial, and we're cutting to a commercial break. Everything we're about to talk about is completely off the table.
100%.
So good. So Bob, where can people get the book and connect with you to learn more about all the stuff you're doing and everything else?
You can find Why My Relationships Suck on Barnes & Nobles, Amazon. You can also reach out to me if you want to sign a copy. I send those out as well.
Yeah.
My website is conlincoaching.com, where you can also get the book from there. And, my business partner, Alex Terranova, and I, we run men's retreats as well, where we take a bunch of men out in the woods and do some impactful, powerful, and fun work for
not deliverance style. Let's be clear. It's not deliverance in the woods. It's
100%. Yeah. Everyone wears clothes. So
we're not squealing like pigs, but there's no compound bows and
no, not at all. It's good work, man. It's a lot of fun. Yep.
That's awesome, Bob. Well, congratulations on everything. Man. I'm not going to ask you when the next book is out, because every author I've ever met will be like, oh yeah, there's another one coming, but we're not going to pin you down on this one because I pinned you down the first time. I'm going to give you up. I want our relationship to be good and not suck. So I'm not going to be right about you writing another one. Congratulations, brother. So good to have you on.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.